Jack was, when you got to know him, he was a sweetheart and funny guy.
There are faces that don't need leading roles to become legendary. Jack Elam, the cowboy with the wandering eye, that sideways glance, always on the brink of exploding into violence, appeared in more than 200 films. Not to be loved, but to be unforgettable. He was an outsider in the very Hollywood. He served a villain, born from dust, who survived the golden years of Western cinema and vanished both like a ghost. The wooden house, where Jack spent his final years in Ashland, Oregon, is now a hollow shell covered in moss and mildew, its crooked roof groaning under the weight of time. Inside, cobwebs hang across faded picture frames, and the armchair where he once watched his own performance has rotted away into silence. But on a March afternoon in 2025, when a group of film researchers entered the place hoping to find a few mementos, they stumbled upon something no one expected: a false wall in the basement sealed with old bricks, behind which sat a heavy wooden chest blanketed in dust and time. Inside the chest were yellowed pages hiding a secret, buried for nearly half a century, his hatred for Gary Cooper. An unspoken confession, a silent wound, and a dark corner of Western cinema no one had ever seen. Watch the full video to uncover the wounds in Jack Elam's life and the grudge against Cooper he carried to the grave. If a face can reflect an entire life, then Jack Elam's skewed eyes were a jagged map of a childhood no one would wish to inherit. Jack was born in 1920 in the sun-scorched deserts of Arizona, where the sunrise felt like a challenge, and the dust didn't just cling to your boots, but burrowed deep into memory. His father, a quiet cashier. His mother, a faint flicker of light, disappeared from Jack's life before he'd even learned the alphabet. From then on, Jack grew up in rickety rented homes where the wooden walls were cracked and the ceiling leaked every sweltering summer. Each night he lay under a patched, threadbare blanket, listening to his father shift on the iron-frame bed in the next room, and the refrigerators rattle as if straining under some heavy secret. When his father remarried, Jack hoped for a warmer home. But fate was cruel. His stepmother wasn't wicked, but neither was she kind. She was the kind of woman who believed in silence more than affection, and closed her bedroom door with a loud, deliberate latch. One summer day in the 8th year of his life, Jack was stabbed in the left eye by a pair of scissors during an accident on the church school playground. No one really remembers the details. All they know is that after that day, his left eye grew dim and never found its rightful place again. From then on, Jack walked out the back door, the path meant for odd children stared at, then ignored. His classmates laughed at him. His teachers glanced past him as if he were a smudge on a blank page. Jack understood. He didn't cry, just sat quietly in the back of the class, sketching strange figures into the desktop, gazing out the window to pour out his sorrow. After his father died, Jack moved in with an aunt in California. In a cramped apartment, he slept on a creaky sofa, woke early to do chores, and spent his afternoons selling newspapers, shining shoes, sometimes helping street vendors at the flea market. Though he once dreamed of being a cartoonist, life took him down other paths, small jobs, then bookkeeping, and eventually Hollywood. When he entered the film industry, he didn't try to hide his unusual eye. Instead, he turned it into a signature, a weapon, a mask, and also a mirror for all the villains, drifters, and disillusioned souls who still clung to a shred of humanity, the roles he would inhabit throughout his career. By the late 1940s, when Hollywood lights still favored symmetrical chiseled faces, Elam quietly emerged from the edge of the screen. And it was that misplaced eye that held the audience captive. If that era was a promised land for heroes who shot straight and spoke of honor, then Elam, with a smile wrinkled like a scar of time, a voice as gravelly as a gun scraping against saddle leather, and a gaze that cut through the red Texas dust, chose to stand on the opposite side of the story. It wasn't until the 1950s, as Westerns entered their golden age, that he truly rose not as someone invited, but as someone who stole the stage. In Rawhide, 1951, High Noon, 52, The Far Country, 1954, and especially Once Upon a Time in the West, that he didn't just play the villain, he made audiences believe that cruelty could be the scar left behind by a life of suffering. And that gave the films a strange, magnetic power. But if anyone ever thought Jack Elam was as fierce in real life as he appeared on screen, they probably never heard him tell a backstage joke or witnessed the way he threw an arm around a colleague with unexpected innocence. When the sunset of the Western genre began to fall in the 1970s, Elam didn't cling to the old spotlight. Instead, he pivoted and poked fun at the very image that had once made others tremble. In Support Your Local Sheriff, 1969, and Support Your Local Gunfighter, 1971, Elam didn't just make people laugh, he made them exhale. His ability to juggle timing, his charming self-deprecation, and the ease with which he looked back at his own darkness, all of it helped Elam not only survive the transitional year, but resurrect himself in radiant form. The very audiences once wary of his crooked gaze now waited for it not to be scared, but to smile. Elam didn't stay confined to the silver screen either. He became a familiar face across television, a welcome stranger each time Gunsmoke Bonanza, The Twilight Zone, Have Gun, Will Travel the Rifleman. With every appearance, he turned that unusual face into something iconic, not like anyone else, but impossible to do without. Across more than 70 films and over 100 television episodes, Elam didn't need to be a hero or a star. He only needed to be himself, a strange presence, a slip in the reel, a scratch in the perfection that audiences never forgot. What transforms a man with a crooked eye and a wrinkled face into a legend? The answer may not lie in the spotlight, but in the way he turned every flaw into art. Jack Elam performed it, lived with it, and offered it back to audiences as a strange gift, a supporting role, but always just as luminous as the lead. Elam stepped away from the entertainment industry in the early 1990s, spending his final years in Oregon with his family. He lived peacefully, reminiscing on a career that spanned more than half a century, where once he had been an outsider, he became an essential figure in the mythology of classic Westerns. In his final days, Elam lived in Ashland, Oregon, a quiet little town. In a wooden house tucked behind a line of trees, he passed away on October 20th, 2003, at the age of 82. Heart failure had silently gnawed at him for years and finally took him in the stillness. After his death, Jack Elam's house became strangely empty. It still sits quietly on the edge of Ashland, as if forgotten by time. The pine-shingled roof is covered in thick, dark moss. The brick chimney crumbles, stained by winters with no firelit. The heavy oak front door leans slightly off its hinge, creaking like a whisper from a vanished world every time the wind slips through. Outside, weeds have grown knee-high, swallowing the cracked stone path. Inside, the wooden floor is warped, rotted in places from rainwater. The air is thick with the scent of mold dust and decaying wood, a feeling like stepping into a memory that's been sealed shut. The texts and videos Cassie presented in court further intensified the situation as the evidence confirmed the abusive and controlling behaviors Diddy had engaged in throughout their time together. One of the key factors in this lawsuit was Justin Bieber's role as a powerful voice in support of Cassie. This not only increased the credibility of the accusations, but also caused the public to view Diddy from a different perspective. They entered the abandoned house, hoping to understand the true legacy Jack Elam left behind. But what they uncovered shocked the world. In a journal found behind a false wall in the basement, amid entries about loneliness and a yearning to be respected as a true artist, one name appeared again and again with seething rage: Gary Cooper. Jack Elam wasn't just bitter. He harbored a deep, burning hatred for Gary Cooper. The yellowed pages held vicious words Elam had never spoken in public life. To the world, Cooper was an untouchable icon of Hollywood's golden age, tall, calm, with eyes like a moral compass for America. But in Elam's view, Cooper embodied deceit, the hidden power games behind the studio lights. He recalled a 1952 film shoot when he was still a nameless extra, granted only a few silent minutes on screen. Gary Cooper, at the height of his fame, strode onto set like a saint. Elam, crooked-eyed, unconventional, was met with icy disdain from Cooper at first glance. The twisted-faced clown Elam remembered Cooper whispering to the director as he passed. Not a direct insult, but the kind of sweet humiliation that crushes the pride of a man just entering the trade. Worse still, Elam wrote that Cooper had lobbied behind the scenes to have him cut from a supporting role in High Noon. In the diary he called it the first time, "I understood the darkness behind glory, that for someone like Gary Cooper to shine, someone like Jack Elam had to be extinguished at the source." That hatred never faded. Though Elam later earned his place as a beloved villain, as a face everyone recognized, he carried that unhealed wound deep within. All the hatred stemmed from the injustices within the industry. Elam had started late, once working as an accountant and auditor at film studios before transitioning into acting. Meanwhile, Gary Cooper was already an icon, favored, praised, and deeply embedded in the Hollywood star ecosystem that protected its chosen few. The two men had crossed paths in the early days of Elam's career, mostly at studio parties or major industry events. But each time, Elam felt a chill from Cooper, a coldness, a distance, and a self-importance that was hard to stomach. To Elam, the model-like charm Cooper exuded was merely a mask, one that concealed what he believed was arrogance and emotional detachment. And that, more than anything, infuriated him, a slow burning resentment that never found resolution. It became a defining fracture in the life of one of the most distinctive actors to ever grace the American Western screen. There are countless offhand interviews from the 1970s where Jack Elam did not hesitate to express his opinions on Gary Cooper, once calling him the Prince of Phonies. Elam believed Cooper had used his good looks and polished demeanor to rise to stardom, while treating lesser-known actors, people like Elam himself, with cold disdain. But the tension between the two was more than just a clash of professional values or ideals. In a story Elam repeated often, he recounted how Cooper once ignored a director's note simply because it had been given while Elam was standing nearby. According to Elam, there was no room in Cooper's artistic world for ugly mugs like him, those who specialized in character parts, rough-edge figures who added depth to westerns but who never made it onto the posters. Unless I was getting shot or already lying dead on the ground, he once said, I never belonged in his world. The rift between Elam and Cooper went deeper than personal dislike. It was ideological. Elam, often cast as the villain, was a man who valued honesty, favored rebellion, and despised the artificial molds of the industry. He had no patience for fakery, no interest in the old-school star culture where fame was rated higher than artistry. Cooper, on the other hand, was the embodiment of success in that very system, a handsome hero favored by studios, admired by mainstream American audiences. Later, he even became known as a conservative figure. To Elam, that image was not just irritating, it was dangerous, for it reinforced outdated ideals about masculinity and morality, obscuring the raw and gritty realities that he and his peers fought to portray. By the late 1950s, as Cooper's star began to dim, Elam finally found roles worthy of his talent, especially in spaghetti westerns and the revisionist western movement. While he never directly competed with Cooper for leading roles, Elam saw his own success as proof that Hollywood needed rougher faces, more complex characters, and stories with inner conflict. When Cinescope Monthly published the full excerpts from Jack Elam's long-forgotten diary, the film world and the public erupted in a kind of hushed shock. What shook readers was the venom, the near-malicious fury Elam had poured into his words about one of America's untouchable screen legends, Gary Cooper. Elam called him the angel-faced man with bloodless hands. That headline appeared on the cover of a special issue of the Hollywood Echo beneath a glowing photo of Cooper in his sheriff's uniform from High Noon, set against Elam's brooding, scrawled handwriting. He wrote of the times Cooper ignored background actors, of the way he'd walk onto set, like even God had to clear a path, and more damningly, of the cowardly silence of a symbol built on the sacrifices of others. Elam's family remained silent, leaving the public to form their own judgments. When Jack Elam met Jan Hodgett, the first woman to enter his life in 1937, it seemed that his misaligned eye no longer felt like a burden. At that time, Elam had not yet stepped into Hollywood. They married, and in their modest home, where the scent of old wood mingled with Jean's baking, Jack found a haven, a place to shed the violent roles Hollywood later cast him in. The marriage lasted 24 years, witnessing Elam's gradual entry into the film industry. Had those years with Jean not resembled a bittersweet ballad, perhaps Jack would never have learned to treasure every fleeting moment of happiness. Together, they welcomed 2 children, Jerry and Scott. In the afternoons, Jack would often sit on the porch telling his kids stories about the wild frontier, his voice warm and low, as if he were more than an actor, as if he were a true storyteller But that happiness, like desert wind, passed quickly. Jean died in 1961 from colon cancer, right as Elam's career was reaching new heights. The loss left a deep emotional wound, and it took him a long time to recover. The house grew cold, and Jack, with a broken heart, stood silently at the window as if waiting for some miracle to bring her back. Shortly afterward, fate intervened. That same year, Jack met Margaret M. Jennison, a light to pull him from the shadows of grief. Margaret, gentle as a moonlit river, stepped into his life, bearing hope. They married, and once again, Jack's home was filled with laughter and the patter of small feet. Jacqueline, their youngest daughter, whom he cherished like a treasure. On many evenings, he'd sit by the fireplace, Margaret leaning on his shoulder, while Jacqueline played nearby as if the whole world existed only in that tender, glowing moment. Jack, once known for playing thugs and outlaws, had become a husband, a father, with a heart brimming with love. After retiring from acting, he chose to step away from the glitz of Hollywood, moving his family to the small town of Ashland, Oregon, where leaf-covered trails and lush green hills cradled his soul. There, Jack found joy in the simplest thing: fishing by the shimmering river, playing golf under the soft sunlight, or simply sitting in his armchair, listening to the birds chirping outside the window. Margaret was always by his side, a faithful companion who never strayed, and Jacqueline, now grown, remained the light in his eyes. In stark contrast to his fierce on-screen persona, Jack in real life was a generous man, always ready to share funny stories from his Hollywood days. He often invited friends to his cabin in Ashland, where the scent of fresh coffee and the sound of laughter filled the air. Despite his declining health, Elam retained his trademark dry wit. Friends and family who visited were treated to his one-of-a-kind behind-the-scenes tales, run-ins with fellow actors, unexpected tumbles on set, and long-held petty grudges. His deadpan humor and quiet charm made him an unforgettable character both on and off screen. Those who worked with him, from directors to bit part players, remembered him as a sincere man who lifted others up, as if he understood the true worth of empathy through his own years of hardship. Margaret outlived Jack, who passed away in 2003. To those closest to the actor, she was seen as his quiet strength, the one who gave him peace, love, and unwavering companionship throughout his colorful, sometimes conflicted, artistic journey. Jack Elam died on October 20th, 2003, at the age of 82. The cause of death was determined to be congestive heart failure, a chronic condition that prevents the heart from pumping blood effectively enough to meet the body's needs. In his final years, Elam struggled with worsening health, and his condition continued to decline. Margaret remained by his side through those difficult days, walking with him through the pain, the fatigue, and the quiet sadness as the spotlight slowly faded. Jack Elam's passing marked the end of a radiant era in classic Western cinema. With his signature lazy eye, weathered face, and fierce expressions, he became an irreplaceable icon of 20th century Hollywood. From cold-blooded gunslingers to quirky supporting roles, Elam always brought raw vitality to the screen. Elam's contributions to Western film and American television were eventually recognized when he was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. Though he never won a major acting award, a single glance or a line delivery from him was often enough to leave a lasting impression, a testament to his undeniable impact. Not only remembered for his unique look and ability to steal the screen in mere minutes, Elam was celebrated for his talent in transforming small roles into vivid, unforgettable characters. After his passing, many actors, directors, and film historians paid tribute, hailing him as one of the rare artists who redefined the importance of the supporting role in cinema. In Ashland, neighbors and friends didn't remember him as a star, but as a kind, humble, and warm-hearted man, someone who cherished his privacy and found happiness in simple pleasures, morning coffee walks in the garden, and quiet conversations with loved ones. Though gone, Jack Elam lives on in every frame he graced, a symbol of character-driven acting and artist who never compromised with mediocrity. From fearsome villains to bumbling cowboys with hearts of gold, he didn't just win audiences over. He proved that cinema doesn't need a perfect face, but a true soul. And Jack Elam gave us exactly that, completely, profoundly, and irreplaceably. If his name rings a bell, if you ever loved a film he was in, let us know how it made you feel in the comments below. And if this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so we can continue this journey into the memories and people once beloved by the world and now almost forgotten. See you in the next video.